Now, what do we think of this move from Marlins manager Skip Schumaker, who called out Sixto Sanchez for the way that he competed in the first inning of Miami's game against the Mets on Sunday? The Marlins lost 7-3. Sixto Sanchez got the start for the Marlins and did not have a very competitive first inning, giving up 4 runs in the frame. And I'll walk you through the play-by-play. He hits Francisco Lindor with a pitch. A wild pitch advances the runner to second. A walk to Brandon Nimmo later in the inning. Base hits to DJ Stewart. A double to Tyrone Taylor. Another walk to Brett Beatty. And a base hit later in the inning by Harrison Bader. All of that coming in the first inning. Couple of walks, a wild pitch, a hit by pitch. Just too many free base runners. And Skip Schumaker, asked about it after the game, had this to say about Sixto Sanchez and the way that he opened up this contest.
Skip, we'll start with Sixto in the first. Obviously, the struggles in the first inning have really been a pattern this season. But today in particular, what do you think led to that struggle with command?
I don't know, but that's unacceptable in the first inning. So if he wants to start at this level, he's going to have to be better in the first inning. It's just what it is. We had a heart-to-heart underneath, and so did Stott. It was better, obviously, the second through the fourth inning, but he's put us in a hole early. And this level, it's tough to come back from 4 runs every single time, and it's not giving his teammates a chance to win.
How about that from Marlins manager Skip Schumaker, saying it's unacceptable in the first inning and that if he wants to start at this level, he's going to have to be better than that in the first. I mean, that's about as cut and dry and blunt as you're going to hear from a manager talking about a player whose performance just wasn't up to par. And this is not the first time we have heard Skip Schumaker critical of players for whether it's a perception of effort or just a matter of, this is really not an effort question, I wouldn't think, but a matter of simple performance, which I think the connotation is different if you're talking effort versus talking just execution and performance. So the question that was asked was, what do you make of and how do you explain the first inning struggles for Sixto Sanchez? And he said, look, I can't explain it. I don't know how to explain it. I just know that it cannot happen. This is really interesting, especially if you kind of bring in the context. As I mentioned, not the first time Schumaker has sort of held a player's feet to the fire this year. And, of course, this is the reigning manager of the year in the National League that we're talking about. But under some very intriguing circumstances with the Marlins, where you've got a new front office in there. Earlier this year, we learned that the option or the contract for next year has been voided. And that's a situation that if you're Skip Schumaker and you're learning within the very early portion of 2024 that your team option for next year has been voided, you're basically managing as a lame duck and you know it. But I think Skip Schumaker is the type that's not going to stray from his principles and what he believes in, even if in his heart of hearts he doesn't think he's long for the job in Miami. And I have maintained that I don't think Skip Schumaker on a real down-to-earth level would mind not being long for the job in Miami, because I think other teams around the league, when he ultimately is let go from this job, whether it's a firing or whether it's just at the end of this season his contract is not renewed, I think he's going to be maybe the hottest managerial free agent when the offseason comes. And I don't think something like this with Sixto Sanchez actually works against him. I think it is an honest interpretation of just being blunt about a circumstance. And I don't know how the public is perceiving this. I know there are some people who have said, look, he threw him under the bus. This was not something you can do as a manager. Others say, hey, I like it. It's refreshing to hear this type of talk. When something needs to be said, Skip Schumaker is the type of manager that will say it. What are your interpretations and what are your thoughts on this as Skip Schumaker going after Sixto Sanchez and basically saying he's got to be better in the first inning of an outing? It's been a problem that he has dealt with throughout this season as he's come back from a number of injuries, if I'm understanding correctly. And in recent weeks, the Marlins have tried to stretch him out. Looked like he was primarily used as a relief pitcher for the majority of April. He's been getting built up as a starter and not having a ton of consistent results in that regard. His ERA for the season at 6.41, obviously a former top prospect with the Phillies, and came over to the Marlins in the JT Realmuto trade a number of years ago, and just has not seen his career go in the right trajectory to this point. And Skip Schumaker doesn't mind saying it. Look, you're putting your teammates in a bind when you're struggling with command and not competing on the level that they need in the first inning. And it's interesting from a St. Louis Cardinals perspective, as a lot of the videos we do on this channel pertains to the St. Louis Cardinals. And, of course, Skip Schumaker, formerly the bench coach there in St. Louis before getting the Miami job, the head job in Miami. A couple of interesting connections that I see for Cardinals fans is, look, when Ollie Marmol, Cardinals manager, calls out players for various reasons and says, hey, the players have got to be better, I think a lot of times the interpretation from fans is a negative one, that they don't like hearing that. I know a number of Cardinals fans, when it came to the Tyler O'Neill stuff last year, said Ollie was completely in the wrong. And obviously, when you look at the way that relationship fractured and O'Neill ends up moving on, the Cardinals felt compelled to trade him as a result, and maybe they weren't highly concerned with exactly what they were getting back. They just felt it was a fractured relationship and needed to move O'Neill into a fresh start, and did him a solid, obviously, because he's doing so well so far with the Boston Red Sox. But it's interesting to see, like, in that moment, it was Tyler O'Neill not taking accountability for something that we all could see with our eyes. Whatever the reasoning for Tyler O'Neill last April not running his hardest rounding third base, he factually wasn't, objectively speaking. Now, could Ollie have handled it in a better way? Perhaps. I certainly think he could have. But this is an example where a manager is calling out a player, and I'm having a pretty favorable response to it because I don't mind hearing what is obvious to us as media or as fans with our eyeballs. If Sixto Sanchez is hitting a batter, throwing a wild pitch, and walking two, allowing 3 hits and 4 runs in the first inning of a game, and then he settles in for innings 2, 3, and 4 and gets outs there, it's nice, but it's still not competitive. The Marlins lose that 7-3. How similar for Cardinals fans is that explanation to what we have seen a number of times from a guy like Steven Matz in recent years, or even right now with Matthew Liberatore, the way that situation has developed? And look, I think you could look at the Marlins front office and say the same things that I have said about Liberatore. Is it a completely fair thing to have a guy who's a relief pitcher and then ask him to build up within the season to a starter's workload? And looking at the game logs, it seems like that's what they've done with Sixto Sanchez, very similarly to how the Cardinals have handled Liberatore. And it hasn't panned out because when a guy does come out a little rusty, he doesn't really have the bullets in the chamber, the workload allotment to be able to get through 5 or 6 innings and keep his team in the game. But you give up 4 runs in the first inning. How similar is that to what we've seen in Cardinals land from guys like Matz the last couple of years? And certainly last year, maybe a Jack Flaherty when he would have a rough outing. And now, of course, Flaherty is on to, I think he's leading the American League in strikeouts, which is another question as to how come the Cardinals are not able to get the most out of these players that seem to be able to go elsewhere and thrive. But in the case of Skip Schumaker, just specific to the decision to go say what's on his mind about Sixto Sanchez, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Again, I don't think that Skip Schumaker is the manager of the Marlins next year. It'll be a decision the front office makes. Again, they voided his option for next year already. They said, yeah, we don't even need to see anymore. We're voiding it. Not based on results, right? Because he was manager of the year last year in the National League. Skip Schumaker was. Marlins made the playoffs with a roster that most didn't think could get there, and they have gone in the opposite direction this year, and they've already made a sell type of move to trade away Luis Arias, and I think they're going nowhere fast. If I'm Skip Schumaker, I don't necessarily want to be a part of that anyway, so it doesn't maybe bother me. I know people say, oh, man, they're doing him dirty. Well, they are, but I also think they're doing him a favor because I think he's going to be managing somewhere else next year, and it's going to be a much better situation for him to be in. Because I just don't think the Marlins are in a spot right now where they are looking to be competitive for the next couple of years. It just seems like the trend of the circumstances. But Schumaker, I mentioned, it's not his first time calling a player out. Remember earlier this season, he benched Jesus Sanchez for, I believe it was a play that it was in right field. He didn't make the catch on the fly and then sort of lollipopped the throw back into the infield, allowing a player to extend a single into a double. And this was in late April. Here was the commentary from Schumaker on that play when he benched Jesus Sanchez mid-game.
I have literally no rules except for give me everything you have. He lost the ball in the lights. I've lost the ball in the lights many times. After that, I felt like the effort wasn't there, and so I decided to remove him from the game. Listen, Sanchez plays hard. He's a good kid. He wants to play every day. There's teaching moments, and he hurt himself. He hurt the team by me having to remove him from the game. I know he feels bad about it now, but there's just no excuse for not giving me or his teammates 100% every time he's out there. It's the major leagues. You are blessed to play this game. I mean, so blessed to be out there. There's 20,000 or so that's ever done this before. So you give everything you got until you're removed from the game, and then or we'll find someone else that can do that. I think I will say that every guy gives us everything they have. I mean, it's besides what the record is, everyone is like working. I mean, they are working, but I expect, and our staff expects, and the clubhouse expects, 100% effort when you're out there.
And that was Marlins manager Skip Schumaker on the Jesus Sanchez play earlier this season. Lost the ball in the lights, kind of lollipopped the throw into second, took for granted that, okay, I gave up the hit, but the runner wasn't giving or taking anything for granted, and they end up at second base as a result of him just kind of taking his time, getting the ball back in. And again, I compared it to maybe when Cardinals fans get after Ollie Marmol for throwing players under the bus. The differential that I will say is very obvious to me when it comes to this situation versus Tyler O'Neill last April. And I know that people feel like this is beating a dead horse talking about the O'Neill stuff again, but I do think in this instance it's relevant. I think the mistake that Ollie maybe made with that is it was a little bit, he thought he was being abundantly clear, but I think he could have been even less vague. And the comments that he made where, there's a style of play that we play, and when you're not meeting expectations, he had the way that he said it, but I felt like there was, and maybe it's not fair and Ollie would disagree with this, but some level of uncertainty with exactly what he was saying. And so he kept asking different questions to try to get him to just come out and say it. But I think he maybe was trying to hold off just a little bit in order to not make a mountain out of a molehill, when in reality, by maybe not being as forthcoming and direct as it was with what we heard from Skip Schumaker there when it came to Jesus Sanchez, which is, I didn't think he was given enough effort, and so I pulled him from the game. And he went on to explain what that means and the type of effort that is the expectation. Versus, I think there was a little bit of room for interpretation. And I know that Ollie didn't feel that way, because I remember back to those couple of days when we were asking him about it and felt like we were kind of grasping at straws a little bit. But the cat had been out of the bag in the way that was handled, and O'Neill took exception. And then Ollie could have said, hey, the effort level just wasn't there. And look, I'd have to go back at the quotes and look and see. I realize this is kind of beating a dead horse, but it was interesting. The fact that we see similar rhetoric, but maybe in a little bit of a different way, where Skip Schumaker is coming right out and saying it. And if anybody's got a problem with it, they're going to know exactly what it is that he was getting to, and turned around and said, look, we know that Sanchez is a good kid that plays hard. And in this instance, I just wasn't seeing that from him. And so, needed to pull him from the game and make that understood. And then you have this instance yesterday when it comes to Sixto Sanchez. And, hey, it's just not acceptable to have him throwing the way that he's throwing in the first inning, giving up a couple of walks, a wild pitch, and a hit batter that puts his teammates in a bind. It's interesting, too, because I agree with that. Human nature for an offense to just maybe get a little behind the eight ball and feel that extra pressure when they're in the box, knowing that before the game is really underway, you're down 4-0. That is a tough thing for an offense. And in the St. Louis Cardinals games this year and last year, we've seen a number of times that's kind of been the case too. So let me know your interpretation of it from Schumaker, and how it makes you view him as a manager. You still think he is a very good manager, or is this something you don't like seeing a manager do, be so blunt in throwing a player under the bus? And my take is, I think there's nothing wrong with it. He's not saying anything that's not true, and I think we kind of can appreciate blunt commentary from a manager. Now, he will have to handle that within a clubhouse to say, hey, does that fracture my relationship with the player, or can I tell the truth about this player out public, but then in private give him the encouragement and the words to build him up and allow him to not, allow this to be something that lingers? I think those things both have to happen, and the best of managers can do both sides of that. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, and make sure to hit subscribe on this video if you enjoy Major League Baseball content, and in particular, we have a lot of Cardinals content on this channel, but all MLB content here as well, as we touch on the Schumaker situation. Last week, it was Ron Washington. If you like baseball content in general, hit that subscribe button, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.